I would sort of always mentally prepare myself walking into those meetings, knowing that you'll take some shots. It's okay, because you know where you want to get, and that's what's more important than, let them have their minute and a half of winning. You want to cross the finish line in the end.
But that also explains why your pulse was higher.
Yeah.
Welcome to Under the Knife, the podcast where we cut into topics such as politics, life advice, and medicine, and we do this with the precision of a licensed orthopedic surgeon. I'm your host, Dr. Craig Green, an orthopedic surgeon and elected public official. Well, Rick, thanks for joining me. So, look, session just ended, right? And so you served for 11 years, is that right?
That's right.
Thank you for your service. Tell me one word that describes how you feel that you were not in it this year.
Yeah. That'd be hard to boil down into one word, but I guess for me personally, it was stress-free.
Yeah.
And we talked about this the other day. I showed you my resting heart rate from last June versus this June, and it's almost 30 points down in that one year of being of no longer being in the legislature. And it's one of those things. I guess it's a stressful job. When you're in the middle of it, you don't really feel it. Mm-hmm. You're doing your deal, but obviously it does get to you a little bit more than you think, at least for me.
Right. Well, so from your time there and to time now, you and I talk a little bit more about how hard it is to serve. Like if you just work for Exxon, you can't just go run for office, and how that almost self-selects who is going to serve and what laws will be made that benefits those who are serving.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's what makes having a legislature that is made up of, quote, part-time people so difficult, because you want the legislature to be a reflection of the state and the makeup of the state. And I'm sure this is not a Louisiana specific thing. It's probably across the board. But there's not many jobs. There's not many 9-to-5s or employers that are going to say, every other year you can take 3 months off, and then the other years you can take 2 months off from work. And then that's before you get to any of the other things that go on a weekly basis in the life of a legislature. So it's really, it boils down to the people that have the ability to serve are retired, self-employed, but
passive income.
Yeah, passive income somehow. Maybe have worked themselves, and good for them, they've worked themselves into a situation where they have enough employees that can kind of carry the weight for them. But even when you talk to those people, if they're still trying to run a business, it's going to drop off some when they're in session. And so very few legislators are people that, your average Joe that wakes up, goes to work from 8:30 to 4:30 or 9 to 5 or however it is. There's very few people that their employee would allow them to have the flexibility needed to be in the legislature. And so the problem with that is most of the laws and the lens that they're looked at through probably isn't a really good reflection of the state as a whole.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of, now you're still somewhat in the government space, and we appreciate all that you do for that. What do you think are our hurdles for the next 10 years that we really have to get by? And one of them's a bridge, I know that. But in real things you can point to, but also in concepts.
Right. Well, I think the one hurdle that is becoming a tremendous obstacle for all the other things that we can talk about as we move forward is just the lack of desire to go up to that building or even DC and actually work towards real solutions to tangible problems that people deal with on a day-to-day basis. A lot of the issues that have taken on a life of their own and really drown out every other major issue that we have are all the social issues. And I think, the best that I can tell is that a lot of legislators, congressional people, whatever it may be, they gravitate to those because it grabs so much attention.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're the average legislator, in particular maybe average House member, you're part of a group of 105, and if part of your reasoning for being there is trying to gain some attention or some notoriety, well, the best way to do that is to go create a firestorm around something that maybe affects 2 or 3% of the whole population. And what suffers at the hands of those things are your real major obstacles that affect the economy and business development and people's daily lives, like infrastructure and economic development and coastal restoration. All those things can suffer because the animosity that's built up around these other issues.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, I think that's the biggest thing we're fighting right now is even in my short time there, 11 years ago, I never heard anybody say, well, there's no way I can be for that because the governors are Republican, or there's no way I can't vote for that amendment because a Democrat's offering it up. But in the 11 years, my last 2 or 3 years, I started hearing those things, and now I think it was always kind of there in the back of people's minds, but now they're vocal about it, you know. And so that's really the most difficult thing I see moving forward, just because it negatively impacts all of the other things that we need to be doing.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask this question. So Louisiana's well known for a lot of things.
Yeah.
Le bon temps roulé, the food, the culture. Do you think at any point there's a rub between the laissez-faire culture and let's drive to be the number one GDP producer in the country? Or is there just a balance that we're going to try to hope to get to?
I think you have to work with what you have, and where I think we've sort of failed as a state, or as, the governing bodies of the state, and we have not done a good job of tapping into that and creating something that makes, that's an add-on as to why do people want to move here, which could tremendously impact the state's GDP. And it's become, while we're known for that, we're known for having a good party and having fun on the weekends or really every day of the week. But we haven't figured out how to take that and harness it to make the state a better place. Mm-hmm. And it's just kind of become a place where, people come hang out in New Orleans for a long weekend and then they go back home, but they don't ever leave there saying, man, what an unbelievable place, I want to move there.
Right.
And whereas if you travel, we all touch places, and we could probably all list a number of places. If you travel there for a few days, you'd say, man, I would consider moving here. Mm-hmm. And there's probably very few people that come to Louisiana. They might have the best time in the world when they're here, but they don't say, well, I'm going to move my family, my wife and kids here because of the economic opportunities,
and educational.
Exactly.
So, I remember once you were helping me campaign when I ran for office, and this always stuck out, what you told to me, because your father was in politics, my father was in politics. We're from the same hometown, and
I actually ended up in the seat that your father represented.
That's right. So you and my dad held the same Senate seat. But I remember you saying, my dad didn't leave me a big pile of money. He's not dead, but in general.
Yeah.
But he left me a really good name and a very good work ethic. Mm-hmm. And so what pops to mind when I hear that is the word legacy. And you and I are kind of carrying the baton on those things.
Right.
But it's becoming our turn to pass that baton. Yeah. And so talk to me about how, politics and parenting and how that's all worked for you or is evolving, how you're passing the baton.
Yeah. I think, so for me, I was very fortunate because we both live in the Baton Rouge region, and so I was able to serve in the legislature and not feel like it really had a negative impact on my ability to be a good parent. It wasn't anything I had to sacrifice. I still made the baseball games, the football games, the kindergarten plays and all those sorts of things. And so from that aspect, I was very thankful. I think for any of the guys from North Louisiana, maybe Lake Charles or anywhere else, it's a big sacrifice that they make, the time away from family, because it's way more. It has gotten to be way more than just your average session. They're on the road back and forth to Baton Rouge a bunch, and I think the other aspect in terms of legacy and things like that, my kids probably had more of a front seat of seeing what went on. More opportunities to come to the Capitol and watch, and not that they did a bunch of that, but it was always available to them. And then also just the news cycle of paying attention to what's going on, because you're in the capital city, and so a lot of those things are reported more. But I think one of the big takeaways from me watching both of us, sort of start a political career, coming from where we came from family, I think we deal with things a little more delicately. Not from a right or wrong standpoint, but just from our approach, because we know that it doesn't just really reflect on us, but for people that knew our fathers, or our parents, our moms and dad before us, that if we did something, it could negatively reflect on them. And so I think that, at least for me, always weighed into how I dealt with things. Not necessarily how I voted, but how I treated people and how I dealt with. Whereas now, you have a lot of people that just sort of, they're trying to build that name, but the way they do it a lot of times is with a lot of animosity and being really loud and things like that. And every family that is going to be involved in politics, if they're going to be involved long term, somebody has to start that.
Right.
But I just think, coming from a family that has been involved, it gives you a little more reflection in how you deal with people.
So you're a wise guy, and you have, I think you have very good self-control. What are some things you would do when somebody would provoke you?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't seem like you would fight much, but you would disarm the situation and try to find some grounds to agree on. Well,
I think that was always my goal, and so I really tried to keep in mind what the end goal was. If I was in a committee presenting a bill and maybe somebody's coming at you pretty hard, I was willing to take that and just kind of absorb that blow, because I knew where we wanted to get with the piece of legislation, and maybe a harsh response to them might flip somebody that was on my side, because if you respond the wrong way, then maybe it draws them to come to their defense. So I think whenever you're moving legislation or really doing anything, I think it crosses a lot of different things. If you keep the end goal in mind, it helps you set your ego aside and not feel like you want to bow up and defend yourself every time somebody takes a shot at you. And that's what I always, I would sort of mentally, if it was something that was going to be difficult, I would sort of always mentally prepare myself walking into those meetings, knowing that you'll take some shots. It's okay, because you know where you want to get, and that's what's more important than, let them have their minute and a half
right.
of winning. You want to cross the finish line in the end.
But that also explains why your pulse was higher.
yeah, because you were, and I agree with that, because I think a lot of times I was just absorbing it. I wasn't
right.
I don't think retaliating is the right word, but I wasn't getting it out of my system by sort of shooting back. So I would just hold it all in, and then deal with it like that.
So tell me this: if you're king for a day or governor for 100, what was the first year? What are some 5 things that you would say? Hey, look, and you're not running for governor. This
Sure.
is just in a situation where this is what Louisiana needs the most. You could convince the legislature to do it. What are the 5 things that you would go? This is what we're going to do.
Yeah, I can tell you without a doubt the number one thing that I would do is focus on how can we get another $1 billion a year to infrastructure. And I don't know how you do that, but you can sit down. I was very fortunate. The district I represented was sort of the Mississippi River corridor from Baton Rouge, or north of Baton Rouge, all the way south into Assumption Parish. And every major plant that was looking at Louisiana or any other economic development that was going to create job opportunities and all those sorts of things, if you talk to them, they want to know about three things, and this will kind of lead into the others. But the very first one that they would bring up is your transportation and infrastructure. It's terrible. Roads, bridges, all those sorts of things. It's, how are we going to get our goods, our employees in and out in a timely fashion? And so what are y'all going to do to fix that going forward? And the second thing is workforce development. We need to employ 1,000 people. We can't find 500 that fit what we need. So what are y'all doing to train a workforce? And then education, which is, you've got, y'all want me to move some executives here, or really anybody. If we're moving because we can't find the workforce we need, it's not already here. So we're moving people in.
Right.
They don't want to come here because they can't send their kids to a public school.
Mm-hmm.
If we were building this in Texas, all their kids would be going to public school. Here, if we want to attract them, we've got to give them enough money to pay $15,000 or $20,000 a year per kid to go to private school. And so those three things, not that anything's ever a silver bullet, but infrastructure, that is the one thing that if you spend $1 billion,
you get return.
You're guaranteed to get a return. Mm-hmm. It's not, hey, let's try this, let's do a pilot program. You look at every state in the Gulf South that has boomed. A lot of people try and relate it to, they did this with their education system, they did this with their sales tax or their income tax. They invest in infrastructure.
Right.
If you want to go build a new project in Texas and it's on some property adjacent to an interstate, I can't tell you how many people have said, yeah, we were going to build this project in Texas. We meet with the highway department and whatever government officials, and before we break ground, they've got to exit waiting for us.
Mm-hmm.
You can build something here, and you probably have to fund the exit being built yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just creates so much economic development that everything else you can try and do. You can put money in LED, you can put money in the local economic development groups. If you don't fund infrastructure, all that stuff is not going to work.
So tell me this, switching gears a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You're a spiritual person,
yeah,
and you love the outdoors. What is your guiding principle? And then tell us how. I would think that you hunting and fishing and being in nature is kind of like makes you closer to God.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, to me, that's sort of where my mind rests the most. And it's interesting because even though my job, whether it was in the legislature or now what I do in terms of maybe some governmental relations and consulting type work, it's all relationship built and
right,
built on dealing with lots of people. By nature, that's not who I am. I would have to, if I won the lottery tomorrow, which I wouldn't because I never play, but if I did, I would have to be very careful that I didn't just go off
by
myself, because even to the point where sometimes my kids or my wife, they're like, you need to go spend a day in the woods, just get out of here and go, because that's where my mind relaxes the most. And so it started off as a hobby and something I've always liked to do, but then it really turned into something that's just a major part of my life, and not from a killing or catching aspect. I can go out there and spend hours upon hours, and if I'm enjoying what I'm doing, whether I'm catching fish or killing a turkey or whatever it may be, I just enjoy being out there. And look, I think God's creation, nature, and all that, when you're out there, you get to see it firsthand in a way that you just don't driving through the city.
There's a little bit of a reset.
It is. It's everything slows down, and honestly, whenever I was in the legislature, just a lot of my thoughts and ideas for ways to address issues probably came from being out there by myself and thinking through it and praying about it. And for me, there's not a better place to do any of those things than out there.
And hopefully you don't have a cell signal.
Exactly.
So tell me these two more questions. Where will Rick Ward be, or what will Rick Ward be doing in 10 years?
10 years. Probably some similar things to what I'm doing now, which is my best day or my favorite day is somebody presenting me a problem, not because I like to have people, deal with people that have problems, but I enjoy helping to put the pieces together to fix the problem. And so, whatever I'm doing, I would imagine that it'll have something to do with solution finding, because that's just what I enjoy doing. Whether it be pulling people together to make something happen, or figuring out all the pieces to the puzzle of how something that's been hung up for whatever reason, how can we move this forward and solve the problem? So 10 years from now, whatever I'm doing, even if it's volunteer work or anything else, it will be, trying to help solve problems. But what I like about what I'm doing now is a lot of times I think there's a big misconception about, being successful. That means you're cutthroat and you're only out for yourself or your business. But I think there's a very good avenue now to be able to be successful in business, help the businesses you work for, with, or maybe even part of yourself be successful, but do so in a way that also has a big positive impact on the community that it's doing business in, or the state that it's doing business in. And so one of the things that I've really tried to factor in to the clients I take on or the people I do business with is I want us to make a positive impact around where we're at.
So if, let's say that incoming legislators, as a requirement, they had to meet with Rick Ward as an intro class, what were the three things you'd tell to every one of them, one-on-one or as a group?
Yeah. The first thing I would tell them is build relationships, because for the most difficult things that you're going to do, whether it be legislation that's directly yours or that you're advocating for, most of those things, if it's a new concept, if it's a major change to something that already exists, there's a lot of unknown that goes with that. And so if it's in the Senate and you need 20 votes, or in the House and you need 53, those last handful of votes come from trust and relationships. And that's why you see a lot of people, if you struggle to get legislation passed and you're always hitting, like in the Senate, you're always hitting that 13 or 14 mark. Well, you get those 12 or 13 or 14 that just believe in the same political thought processes that you do, but you can't get those last 4 or 5 because you hadn't built the relationships that say, man, I just don't know, but I'm going to trust what you tell me, and I'm going to give this a shot because it's your name on it. So the first one would be build relationships. I think the second one is do your best to stay away from the words always and never. And I've watched more people, we're all guilty of this, I guess, to some extent. You want to say, I'll always do this or I'll never do that, and a lot of times it comes from election season. I'll never vote for this. I will always support this. Well, you don't have, if in particular, if you've never been elected to the legislature before, you have no idea the nuance that comes with all that. So I'll never vote to renew a tax. Well, you get up there and you've got $500 million rolling off the books, and all $500 million of that has to be cut from higher ed, LSU, Southeastern, UL, or healthcare.
Sure.
Your rural hospital that's 20 minutes from your house may get shut down. And a lot of people will say, oh yeah, but that's been said for years and it's never happened. Well, that's because we've always managed to put together enough votes to keep those things from happening. So that would be number two. And then I think number three is back to what we talked about a little while ago. Stay calm. Know where what I would always try and do, I would map out my bills, as many paths as I could possibly think of to get them from the introduction to the governor's signature. And you might hit a roadblock, and that's okay. Well, we'll go with plan B. But if you get frustrated in the moment and storm out of a room and you just burnt 3 bridges, well, then you just ruined plan B and plan C. So stay calm and stay the course, and you'll be a lot more successful if you do that.
Well, I would sure say in closing that I wish that Louisiana had about 100 more Rick Wards. Well,
that's mutual with you, man.
But also, I don't see Louisiana having a successful future without you. So please do stay engaged. And I sure appreciate you joining us today. And
no, thank you. This was fun.
I saw you at dinner last night and do this today, so I'll probably see you tomorrow or the next day.
Exactly.
Something.
Absolutely.
So
well, thank you. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, man. Take care.
All right.
Thank you for joining us today, and a big thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in to this surgical exploration of politics, healthcare, and life. I've been your host, Dr. Craig Green. Remember to stay informed, stay sharp, and join us next time to see which of life's topics we'll dissect under the knife.